Welcome back to the Red Dice Diaries. I'm your host, John, and for this episode I'm asking, could I go back to old school manual play? Okay, so let me preface this episode by saying that I am actually a big fan of technology. I store my prep in Obsidian Notes after trying a number of different note apps. I love having the ability to automate, speed up certain math bits of D&D. I think having information about items, abilities and the like stored online so you can quickly reference and search them without having to page through books is a great time saver. So no, I don't have any hatred of technology, but what spurred this sort of thought experiment, if you want to call it that, was our OSE game on the 4th of March. We had a number of technical problems with FoundryVTT. And when I say that, I mean there were numerous connection problems during the game. Changing maps was taking an absolute age. Players were dropping out or lagging a great deal. At one point, I even had to share my screen via Zoom just so they could see the map and make several of the rolls for the players using the automated roller. Now, normally I'm a big fan and advocate of FoundryVTT, so I think it's got some great features, but recently I seem to have been having nothing but issues with it. Now, I'm lucky enough to have some great players who have bared with us during the technical issues with good humour, and we've still had fun during the session. Luckily, I've also got players who are more tech savvy than me, and like I say, I'm not a complete Luddite, but neither am I an IT consultant, and they've been prepared to help out with the issues, both in and out of the game, really going above and beyond. So shout out to Dave Hodgkinson and Darren Green, aka Arfed, who've really been a great help during this. But these issues have become increasingly regular and more frustrating over the past few months. It's doubly frustrating given that nothing has really changed on my computer system in the past few months, also because of the amount of hours I've put into getting maps, tokens, etc. on the FoundryVTT system. Much as I enjoyed running the session, and don't get me wrong, I really did, the constant issues are a bit of a dampener on my enthusiasm. Although, don't get me wrong, I'm definitely going to keep running the campaign because I very much enjoy it. It's just that these technical issues just take a little bit of that shine off at the end of a session and make everything a little bit sort of extra hassle, which, as you know out there, GMs, like running a game you have to spin a lot of different plates at the same time, and you don't need someone adding a few more. So it's got me thinking, what can I do as a backup, and could I go back to running things manually? Now, obviously, I can't run completely manual face-to-face with the current group I've got, because a number of the players live in different countries, but I love the group we've put together, and I want to keep GMing for them. So, what can I do? Is there some sort of compromise solution I could reach with this? Well, it's been my general experience that the more complicated something is and the more different options it gives you when it comes to technology, the more chance there is of stuff going wrong. Now, don't misunderstand me. Normally, I love options. I'm often banging on about it in my RPG reviews and stuff like that. However, I've also got to have something that is reasonably reliable. Like I was saying, much as I love GMing, it's stressful enough without having to deal with tech malfunctions on top of that. So I've been spending a bit of time looking at potential backups or simpler options that I could use. And one of these was the very simple browser-based VTT Owlbear Rodeo. I'm currently playing in a drop-in Sunday OSE game run by the author Gavin Norman, he of Necrotic Gnome fame, and we use Owlbear Rodeo for that. It basically has a dice roller, allows you to import graphics as map, and slide little tokens around on it. That's pretty much all it does. And in fact, my old mate Pete Jones of the Dragons Are Real podcast did an excellent video talking about Owlbear Rodeo a while back. I'll put a link to his video down in the description. So, the day after the session, which was actually today as I'm recording this, because I'll record a bit ahead, I had a tinker with Owlbear Rodeo, and thanks again to Darren Green for helping me give it a test run, and I was able to create a version of the main campaign map from our Smoke and Snow game in about 10 minutes. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't look quite as snazzy, it doesn't have any extra functionality or anything like that. Obviously, I can't store character sheets, monsters, items, or automate stuff with macros, but it's a reasonably good-looking version of the map. It's let me put tokens on there to like notate where places are and to represent the player party and stuff like that. and it's got a really simple user interface. I was able to pretty much pick it up without reading any instructions on it. It just seems to all work together, and like I say, it's a little bit limited, but what it does very well. And this got me thinking, well, could I combine Owlbear Rodeo with other simple tools? So not going completely manual, but just simplifying and streamlining down a few things. Because as I've said, if there's less potential avenues for things to go wrong, I'm all in favour of that. So I'm not sure if I'm going to use Owlbear Rodeo as my main VTT, because I do like the automation options and stuff like that. However, it is nice to have a simple option available as backup, if nothing else. So if FoundryVTT or whatever solution I use in the future continues to arse up, then it wouldn't take me long to send a join link to the players, jump quickly on Owlbear Rodeo, and we can use that. And since my streaming software just captures my second monitor, as long as I'm in the browser window on the second monitor, I pretty much don't have to change any of my streaming stuff. But you might be saying, well, what are you going to do about the character sheets, John, if they're no longer stored in the VTT? Is everyone going to have like a little piece of paper with them written on or whatever? Well, again, I didn't want to have like little bits of paper flying around everywhere. So again, I've gone for like a bit of a compromise. I've just set up a simple Google sheet on my Google Drive, a little bit of a spreadsheet that has a worksheet with all the player character sheets on it. And luckily OSE isn't a ridiculously complicated game, so setting that up didn't take long. And then there's a second worksheet which we can use to put the stats for retainers on. And if I keep this up to date, because I've transcribed all of the characters and retainers over from FoundryVTT, then I can easily share a link to that spreadsheet with the players so they can open it up in a browser tab and reference it during the session. So what about all the other stuff that FoundryVTT does? What would I do with that? Well, most of the monster stats I use are either straight from OSE or I have them written down in my Obsidian Notes vault, so I could pretty easily access them. I mean, we might have to look up rules, details for items, and do a bit more basic math, but generally, as long as the players know the stuff on their character sheets, I can no doubt handle all the NPC stuff. There'll be a little bit of a period of adjustment because we're all used to the sort of automated bits and pieces and all the extra little widgets and stuff you can have running on a VTT. But, well, we all sort of started off, most of us, like playing before the internet age and before we had loads of stuff on computers. So it shouldn't be too difficult. Like I said, we're not going entirely back to basics. We're just sort of streamlining things down a bit. So my plan going forward for Smoke and Snow and for my games in general is for the next session we're going to try and use FoundryVTT with 95% of like the various optional modules and stuff disabled, just to see if that helps. If we start having loads of problems again during the session, I'm going to quickly send the players the link to the Google Sheet and Owlbear Rodeo, and we will jump onto that and use that for the session. And if this happens a few times, then we'll potentially look at transferring over to that as a more permanent solution. Now, as is often the way with this sort of thought experiment, it's more sort of turned into a thought avalanche for me, where I've been sort of mulling it over all day since we had the session, and it started me off down a few other avenues of thought, and it's got me thinking about whether the sort of streamlining of my applications could be taken even further. For example, I've got a paid Zoom account at the moment that I use for, well, I use it for Johannes's Burning Wheel game and for my Smoke and Snow OSE campaign, and whilst it works really well, I've been trying to streamline my expenses recently, what with the cost of living and seemingly everything else going up in price. So I'm wondering, do I really need that paid Zoom account? Now, unfortunately, because I've had to streamline down a bit, I've had to stop supporting a number of Patreons and the like just to try and save a bit of money. And it occurs to me that, well, the video and audio capabilities of Discord, which is obviously free, have come on in leaps and bounds over the last few years. I mean, we're using Discord exclusively for the OSE game that Gavin runs, and it works pretty well. So I've started to think, well, perhaps I should scrap my Zoom subscription and just use Discord. After all, it wouldn't take much to set up a small server, invite the players to it, have a video/voice room on there, and we just run it out of that. Again, if I can put it on one of my monitors, I can capture that specific screen instead of the Zoom screen, and it shouldn't have any problems for my streaming software. So, but who knows, we'll see in the future. So those are my thoughts about how I might potentially streamline or sort of go for simpler options with my campaigns going forward. Ironically, as I'm sort of thinking about simpler things and I'm having more problems, that I'm now probably using the most sort of high-tech computer I've ever owned in my life. But the software at the minute, certainly with Foundry, just seems to be causing an awful lot of grief. Hopefully, disabling all the various optional stuff will sort that out. But if it doesn't, I'm taking comfort in the fact that I have got much simpler options. And while they're not perfect, because what is, at least it will enable us to run the game in a similar manner to what we've become accustomed to. So, have you got any thoughts about taking things back to a simpler basis, whilst within your own limitations? So like I say, I can't go fully back to basics because I need video conferencing to speak to my players. But have you got any thoughts about how you've maybe streamlined your own games or taken them a bit back to basics? Or are you a full ahead, all the tech, all the time person? Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and whether you've managed to streamline your own games or whether you've suffered with tech problems yourself. Maybe we can all bemoan all the various irregularities of technology together. If you'd like to get in touch, you can leave us a voicemail message, either using SpeakPipe or Anchor. There'll be links down in the description. Or you can send us an email to rddrpgpodcast@gmail.com. Until we see you again, take care, stay safe, and whatever you're playing, have fun. Take care.